Sounds
I'll
good.
listen to the recording.
Jump in and out as you see fit. We're
Because
always happy to have
I
you.
cannot miss Jesus.
You absolutely cannot. We wouldn't allow it.
No, you can miss
awesome.
that.
All righty. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So welcome. This is LA Web Professionals. This is our February 2023 meeting with Jesús Ramirez, who is the Photoshop training channel guru, expert, YouTube content creator extraordinaire, trainer, fantastic all around subject matter expert in Photoshop. And before we bring Jesús on, we're going to go ahead and kick off today's meeting with our friend and Adobe community professional partner with along with myself and Daniel. Daniel, say hi, wave hi. This is Andrea Batts-Latson. She's also a fantastic Adobe community professional trainer, Adobe Express guru, and so on. And we love having Andrea. So she's going to kick off today's session. Andrea, what do you have in the books for us today?
All right. Oh my gosh. You know, you made it when you're the opening act for like Jesús Ramirez, who's like the Whitney Houston of Photoshop. He's just amazing. Exactly. So I'm going to, today, I'm going to start from a template so we can, and I'm going to do an Instagram story. Let me go ahead and share my screen because I thought I was sharing and I was about to go, but you would have seen nothing. Do you see my screen?
We do indeed.
All right. So talking to Daniel, he was saying that you guys want to see a practical like way that you would use this. So Adobe Express has like a lot of templates that you can use and you can start off with. Typically I start from scratch. So I wanted to make sure this time, in the sake of time, I'm going to start from a template. So I'm going to say we're going to create an Instagram story. The topic, there are several things I was, thinking about that happened in February, but, things from women's history to this Black history. There's just a lot of things that are coming up now. When I hit that, the template should have shown up, and you guys know that I'm having an ongoing issue with my Express, but that's okay. I was prepared for it. So I have Express on another account over here, which is the free version. So hopefully, you guys still there? Okay, all right. It sounded like it was gone. So hopefully, we don't have any hiccups. All right, so I'm gonna start from Instagram story. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the other one real quick because I think I know what the issue might be. All right, so I'm gonna start from Instagram story, which is gonna give us the size of the Instagram story. And now I can go in and just go ahead and start creating, or I can click over here at template and I can choose like, let's just say women's history since it's coming up. All right, and then once I choose the template and I see one that we like, I can go ahead and select that and it'll pull up all the things that are part of this template. All right, so now I can say, I can go ahead and start making changes. So I'm just gonna change this to, I'll keep women's history. All right, so I can change that to Women's History Month. I can also change out the image after Adobe. I can change the image by just double clicking it. I'm going to just type in women. I love that photo, but I like this one too. And the cool thing about it is it's gonna come in with whatever effects were already on here. So as you can see, remove background was already on here from the previous effect. So all I have to do is really resize this. Okay. And then whatever I want to get rid of, I can. I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't need the little
Why did you have to resize it?
Why did I have to resize it?
Yeah, it was already the right size, wasn't it?
No, it was huge. Like you only saw these two ladies. You couldn't
Right,
see.
but didn't I see it a moment before at the right size with that halo-y thing behind it?
No, I think that was a different image that was in it before. Like if I
Was it a similar image?
this is how it came in.
Right,
If
before
that's-
that,
Oh, before that. Okay, hang on.
there.
Before-
Okay, yeah, different. Apologies.
No, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them out. And I can reshadow them in a few. Okay, and so nominate inspiring women of your life. If we want to keep that, we can. This is their little logo. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And then I'm going to go to shapes. And I'm going to type logo just to see what type of images come up. Just if anything comes up that catches our eye that will work with maybe our company. So we're going to fake like we made this logo. You know, women, ideas. That's what that reminds me of. Boom, let's do that one. Okay, so kind of watermarked in. Okay. All right, so I'm going to delete. Oops, that's not what I want to delete. I'm going to delete this background because we're going to make our own. All right, I'm going to change this color. And if I want to change the color to something that's inside of the image, I can just click on the eyedropper. You guys already know that. Click on that and it can give me another color. Now I know that hurts your eyes. It's okay. We're not keeping that. I'm just for now. All right. So I'm going to click on here. I'm going to choose another color that's inside. I like to make my image be my starting point. So maybe, yeah, lightens up a little bit. Maybe, we'll see. And then what I want to do next is I'm going to go grab another image to be in the background because it looks like there's a party. We're kind of celebrating. So I kind of want to see what type of celebratory backgrounds that are already built in. I told you last time this is pretty new. So there aren't a lot of images, but maybe we'll find something. Let's type confetti. Oh. Let's see. Let's see how this looks. Yep, it's a bit strong. So, you know, we can go ahead and we have options to maybe bring these down a little bit. I can go to what I like to do lately is I like to blur. There we go. Just so that, just to give it interest in the background. I don't want them, and I need to go ahead and do some text treatment to this. So I may add a shadow. I might add an outline. And I would definitely change the font for sure. But I'm just trying to see what, okay. Might change the color, definitely change the font color. And maybe that'll be blue. Nope, don't like that. Nope, don't like that. Let's see. And then I might definitely change that font. So remember, last time we talked about recommendations. So in the sake of time, we can actually choose one of these recommendations versus going through and looking. So I might kind of like how that one's taller. If I don't like any of these, I can click explore more. And then we'll just see what, you know, maybe. I actually like a strong font. I think. All right, I think I'm gonna bring this down a line as well and maybe make it magical. So I'm gonna go with alignment and change the alignment to something more like magic so that I can actually make this huge. Bring this smaller. And then I would play with the colors as well. Maybe since this one, maybe I can take and change this to try black. How am I doing time-wise?
Don't want to sound like a mansplainer, but I want to see Women's History Month there.
No, you're right. You are absolutely right. No, thank you. Listen,
We have about 3 more minutes.
it takes a village. I'm all about my,
Right, exactly.
Sorry, under the circumstances.
Hey, listen, I appreciate it. 100%. You would never, the one thing you would never see me get angry at is someone correcting like the spelling or whatever. Because I can see it when it's not me, but when it is me, it's totally different story. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and try to find a font I like better with this. Definitely don't like that orange, so I would definitely play with that. But let me go ahead and change this color. Change it to a font that's dominate. This is where I can spend all day, is trying to find a font that I really like, or where I spend the most of my time. Let's see. I don't really like that one, but I'm gonna pretend because that's what I'm doing. All right, so I'm gonna go here and make that, maybe that blue. And then this is too strong on the background, so I have several choices, but what I like to do is just go ahead and grab another shape. Rectangle. Well, also we have gradients as well. So I could grab a gradient from, and work this, but I'm going to see what happens. Now I'm curious. All right, so that. Actually, that's giving me more what I want. Okay, so I got. How am I doing, Denise?
You got 1 minute.
Oh Lord. Okay, this is where the pressure's on. All right, let me see. And then I might decide I don't want that at all. It's 6 up on its own. Okay, so Women's History Month, nominated woman, and I want to do one more thing. Let me see.
My goodness.
1 minute. Okay, we don't have it. That's all right. I'm gonna go with this, and I'm gonna say this is done. Oh, buzzer beater, right? Did I make the buzzer beater?
You made the buzzer beater. And just to end it off, if anybody has any questions for Andrea about using Adobe Express, go ahead and unmute yourselves and ask your question. And while you're asking, I just threw up a quick poll to see who is using Adobe Express right now. So if anybody wants to throw in their answers in, if you have any questions, go ahead and unmute. Nice, nice. Okay, we're getting some of those answers in. Laura Lee says she hasn't used Express yet, but hopefully this will be an enticement because you can see just how quick it is to be able to create your social media posts, graphics. You can use these graphics in emails, you can use them in video, you can use them for print material, you can use them for all kinds of cool things. So we wanted to make sure everybody has an opportunity to see.
And it's super
My only question is whether the Nominate Inspiring Woman font is a deliberate finger in the eye.
Well, we have the ability to change out the fonts to whatever we like. I want to see what Doug puts together when he does it.
I don't do
it. All right, and here's the results of the poll. We have 38% are creating social media posts and email graphics. 5% are building presentations and documents, and 5% are creating quick videos, and 52%, so about half of you have not tried Express yet. So we are welcoming you to go ahead and give it a go and see how you like it. So at this point, I want to thank Andrea. Thank you so much for joining in today, for kicking us off, for always doing a great job of being creative with Adobe Express. And we look forward to seeing what you got next up in the queue. So, all right. And I see we've got a few more faces that joined us today. I see Dennis is here. Dennis Dunbar is here. Harold Buckman is here. Good to see you. Pablo, you joined in. We appreciate you coming in. Jessamine is here. And I thought I saw Scott Valentine's name, which is a name I haven't seen in forever. Good to see you there. Darren, good to see you. Cynthia is here as well. And we are so glad that all of you were able to join in. Thank you so much. Jesus, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you. It is your time to shine, and we'll go ahead and spotlight you and get you going. And before we also get started, I wanted to ask, do you prefer, if folks have questions, do you want them to just jump in, or would you prefer me to tell you when there's a question available or anything like that?
Yeah, people can just jump in, no problem.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so we're a small group. This presentation is for you. Jesus, take it away. We appreciate you joining us tonight.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Anissa, and thank you so much, Andrea, for the Adobe Express presentation. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me. I see a lot of familiar faces in the chat. I see Hannah, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me. I see the finishing master Dennis Dunbar in the chat as well. Thank you so much. It's super cool to see a lot of familiar faces. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jesús Ramirez. I run a YouTube channel called the Photoshop Training Channel, where, believe it or not, I teach Photoshop. And what I'm going to do today is just show you several different tips and tricks that I hope that you find beneficial in your work. There are no particular order, and some of these may be advanced, but I'm going to try to explain the topics so that they're accessible even if you are a beginner. And I just realized I'm not sharing my screen, so let me go ahead and do that now. And please let me know if you guys can see my screen in the chat.
All good?
Oh, good. Awesome. There's a QR code. You can scan it if you like. Take a picture of your screen, and that'll take you to my YouTube channel, my website. Oh, and I just started a podcast. Episode number 1 was just released a couple of days ago with my good friend Mark Heaps, where we talked about the influence of AI in design and art. Mark Heaps, who some of you may know, is an Adobe Max speaker. He's been in the industry for many, many years. He now works at an AI company, and he is really the best person to listen to when it comes to AI art, since he is in the middle of it all, and he also is coming from a designer, photographer perspective. So it's definitely worth a listen. So the link will be there if you click, or if you take a picture of the QR code. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. You guys can look me up if you want. YouTube channel, Photoshop Training Channel.
Pablo just wanted to know what's the name of the podcast one more time.
Oh, yeah, sure. The podcast is Today's Creator. And you can find it on all your favorite streaming or podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you like. The QR code will also take you, like I said, to a page where you can just tap on that podcast link and you can select where to listen to it. Or if you prefer to watch it, it is also on YouTube on Today's Creator YouTube channel.
It was amazing. I can just tell you, it was amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. And I really appreciate that.
Amazing.
And all the credit goes to Mark. He was the one doing all the talking. I was just asking questions and listening.
Excellent.
But yeah, let's jump right into the first thing that I wanted to show you. So I'm just going to create a new document, and we're going to talk about creating brushes. I really believe that in order for you to get good edges when masking, you either need to have good brushes or you need to create your own. So I'm going to show you the process that I like to use to create brushes for masking so that you can get better edges. So if you're working on a project where you have something that looks like this and you need to mask something that looks like this, you can already see the difficulties that may arise. So we have a shallow depth of field. We definitely don't have defined edges. Even though this is up against a solid background, it's still going to be very difficult to mask. So I believe that having a custom brush might do a good job rather than just going through the regular masking process. The regular masking process would be something along the lines of making a selection out of the main subject. There's so many ways of doing that in Photoshop these days. You take your pick. You can use either the quick selection tool to click and drag over the image you selected. You can click on the select subject button. You can go into the properties panel and click on remove background. Like I said, so many ways of doing it. In this case, we'll just click on remove background. This will use artificial intelligence known as Adobe Sensei to remove the background. As you can see, it didn't do that good of a job, but you can always come back and paint anything in by using the brush tool. And I'll just select a soft brush. And I'm going to do it quickly here because this is really not the important part. The important part is the actual mask that we're going to create. So what I like to do is I like to paint more than what I need. And then I'll tap on the X key, make sure that black is my foreground color. Black hides, white reveals on a mask. And I'm just going to paint like so. And also, I just realized one thing is probably really difficult to see if you're not used to the checkerboard background. So just for the purposes of visualization, I'm going to create a solid color fill layer and place that at the bottom of the layer stack. Here's a fun keyboard shortcut: Control, Shift, and the left bracket key on Windows, Command, Shift, and the left bracket key on the Mac to jump the currently selected layer to the very bottom of the layer stack. So you don't have to click and drag layers as you move them up and down. If you just hold Control and the bracket keys, you can move the layers up and down the layer stack. So Control right bracket key, layer goes up. Control left bracket key, layer goes down. If you hold the Shift key, it'll jump it to the bottom of the layer stack or to the top of the layer stack. If it's in a group, it'll jump it to the top of the group, and then you have to do one more time to jump all the way to the top of the layer stack. But anyway, that saves you time from, clicking and dragging. And it might seem like a simple thing, but I'm working with two monitors. So if I'm working on this monitor here on my left, it becomes quite tedious to come all the way to the right side, drag it up, and then go back to my screen where I'm working. But anyway, back to creating a brush. So once I have something that looks like this, what I like to do is go into Filter, Other, and Minimum to contract the mask. Oops, and I'm on the wrong layer here. You need to have the layer mask selected. Filter, Other, Minimum, and this contracts the mask. And make sure that you enabled roundness instead of squaredness, because it allows you to use decimal points instead of whole numbers. So with squaredness, you can only do a contraction of whole numbers, right? So either 1 or 2 pixels. You can't really go in between. But if 2 is too much and 1 is not enough, then select roundness, and now you can use decimal points, and you can do something like 1.5 or whatever it is, any decimal value you like. But this gives you more control and more flexibility. So I like to use roundness, and I'm just going to increase this to contract the mask and try to remove as much of the white edge as possible. And this is going to be good. And I'll press OK. And now we're going to create our brush. We need to create a brush that's going to create the illusion or the effect of these fuzzy edges. So how do we do that? I'm going to go into the File menu, choose New, and I'll just create a document that's 1080 by 1080 and click on Create. Now, there's nothing wrong with selecting the brush tool and then just painting, like a hair strand or anything you like. Now, the reason that I don't like doing that is because I want to have a brush that is super, super sharp, and I control how blurry it is after the fact. So I prefer to use a path for that, or a shape, a vector shape. So I can go into the curvature pen tool, make sure that I have no fill. So click on this icon so you have that slash, that red slash on the fill, and a stroke. And I can just now come in here and start creating my little fuzzy furball. And there's no right or wrong, really. You can just start doing this however you like, whatever shape you like. And we'll call that good for now. I hope that it works. If there's something that you don't like, you can just click on these points and adjust them. But we'll just say that this is a perfect hairball. I don't know if it will be, so we'll see in a moment. And I'm actually trying to make sure that we don't have too many of those clumps there. So they're spread out a little bit. So this probably will work. And what I'm going to do now is go into the edit menu and choose define brush preset. And you can see my little fuzzy ball there. And you can give it whatever name you like. It doesn't matter in this case. So I'm just going to press OK. That will enable the brush tool and immediately activate the brush that we created. So I'm going to disable this layer and create a new layer so that I can paint so that you can see the result. And the result is this, which doesn't look much like a furball. So we need to adjust it. To do so, we can click on this icon here to bring up the brush settings and notice the preview box here at the bottom. That box will give us a live representation of the adjustments we make on these options. So the first one I'll enable is the shape dynamics, and I can increase the angle jitter all the way to 100%. That will rotate my brush tip so that every time it paints it in a different angle. So it doesn't look so uniform like it looks there. So now look at the difference when I paint. That looks more like a furball, which is perfect. Then I can increase the size jitter so that not all of the furballs are the same size, and it just creates a more random look, and that's what I want. I can also go into the scattering and increase the count to paint more, or I can increase the scatter so that it scatters a little bit as it paints. And I think this is going to be what I want. See that? See how now that looks like a furball? So this looks a lot like the edges of this little puppet here. So now what I can do is enable my mask again. And there's a couple things you can do. There's no right or wrong. It just depends on the project, your preference. One of the things that you can do, and I'll start at the bottom so you can see the difference here. I'm going to zoom in by tapping in the Z key. And if you remember, these edges were really, really blurry. So to match that in a mask, I will need to create a layer behind that puppet. So I'm under the puppet. And then I can hold the Alt key on Windows, Option key in the Mac when I have the brush selected to temporarily enable the eyedropper tool. And I can select the color of the puppet, and then I can start painting on these edges. See that? And if I realize that the edges are not working because the brush is not right, I can always come back into my brush settings and I can maybe adjust the scattering, maybe go into the brush tip and increase the spacing so that they're not so close together. And I can continue painting along these edges like so, whatever works for the image that you have. But this is going to give you a much better result than just trying to mask something like this because it's next to impossible. So once you have something like this, you can go into the filter menu, blur, Gaussian blur, and just blur this accordingly so that it matches the blur of the actual image like so. The other thing you can do is go onto the layer mask, and on the layer mask, paint with white to reveal the original pixels from those edges like so. And the other thing, I can, of course, make a selection and blur it, but I want to show you a different option. So selection like so, and blur, that'll give you that result. Look how those edges look now. They look great. That's one option. The other option is instead of making a selection and using the blur filter, is going into the blur tool, and now you can manually blur the edges. And this may work better if there's a transition where you go from out of focus to in focus. This will help you create that transition better. So filter if you want to do a global adjustment, and this is probably better if you just want to blur it in like so. But I'm blurring the edges, and you can see how those edges are much, much better than anything I would have masked. There is no comparison. Also, this particular image has sharper edges. On the sharper edges is a little bit easier actually, because all you need to do is create a layer. Same process, make a selection out of the color on the edge, and just paint. Just make sure that you have something that looks similar to the actual edges like so, and just paint. In this case, I think my brush is painting the brush tips too close to each other. So I'm going to increase the spacing a little bit, and I can just continue painting along the edges like so. And then if I get to an area where the color changes, just sample by holding Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, clicking, and continue painting like so. And you can do the same thing by selecting the layer mask, painting with white to reveal, and maybe reveal some of the original colors in there. This may or may not work depending on your image. In this case, I think it'll work. So you can always do a combination. And in this case, if there's just a slight blur, not a complete blur, I would recommend using the brush tool and then just giving it a little bit of a blur so that it's not so sharp. Remember to do the other layer as well. And when I double click on the zoom tool to fit the image to screen, you can see the hand tool to fit the image to screen, sorry, you can see that the edges look really, really good. Again, much better than anything I would have been able to mask. So obviously we're not going to do the entire puppet, but that is the technique that I would use to mask something very complicated. And the key was to create my own custom brush just by using the curvature pen tool and creating something that looks somewhat like a furball. Any questions before I move on?
I don't see any in the chat. Anyone have any questions? Feel free to unmute.
Can you
Go
use
ahead,
a
Doug.
gradient overlay to mask out with?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. It was the audio was not coming through. What about masking out?
Oh, couldn't you use a variable gradient to apply over the brush strokes so that it would pop in and out of color?
Sure. So you're saying that let me see, with this layer, for example, I could create a mask and then using like a black and white gradient on this mask to kind of reveal and hide objects. Is that what you're referring to?
No, not a mask. So the brush will actually have a gradient built into it so that when you're brushing it, it randomly will choose between the two colors that you have selected.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, is the color dynamics where I can select between the foreground and background color. So I can select black and white and it'll choose between the two, or a jitter between the two by adjusting these sliders. And then it won't always paint one solid color. Was that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, you could definitely do that if you like. For my style of masking, I don't like that. I like to just manually control it, but you can certainly do that if you wanted to. And in case people are interested, choosing color dynamics allows you to have a foreground and background jitter, which just means that the brush will paint using whatever colors you have selected in the foreground and background. If you have a layer mask active, you won't be able to select different colors, just different tones. So like from white to black, but you wouldn't be able to select red, for example, because you're on the mask. You would have to use a regular layer if you want to select a different color, for example, red in this case. And then, yeah, you would need to adjust the jitter and all that to control how it paints. And I guess I can show you how that works. Notice that my foreground color is red and my background color is white, but when I paint, you can see that I'm not painting necessarily just with red and white. I'm painting with red, white, and the hues in between. And it creates that effect. So that's definitely something else you can do. For something like this, it probably would work well to have, maybe like the darkest color selected and also the brightest color selected or something along those lines, and then use it to paint like so. You can certainly do that if you want.
Your technique is awesome, and it looks like the frizzier the fuzz, the better. What about hair more like your own or my hair?
Yeah,
that tends to be straighter. How?
Sure. Let me show you how to create a brush.
That?
Yeah, let me show you how to create a brush for that. So if we were doing hair like mine specifically, it's super straight and super spiky. It's actually quite an easy brush to make. If it's hair like mine, again, I'll do a 1080 by 1080. And with the curvature pen tool, I can just click once on top, click once on the bottom, click on the top again, and then click in the center, drag out a little bit, click in the center, drag out, and create just like a hair strand like so. I might change my stroke so that it is in the inside rather than the outside. Yeah, that looks better. So basically I would create something that looks like this and then go into edit define brush preset. Again, the name doesn't matter, but give it a descriptive name so that when you create a brush, you can find it and then use it later. But I'm not going to take the time to do that now. And when I paint, you will see that again, it really doesn't look like much, right? Even if I paint with black, it just looks like that. But what I can do now is I can make some adjustments again from the brush settings. So brush tip, the spacing's good. I won't change that. I'm going to go into the dynamics here and increase the size jitter so that they're not all the same size. The angle jitter, again, so they're not all doing the facing exactly the same way. See that? But you can kind of see now, and I'm only worried about the very tip, by the way, like the top part. That's what I'm looking at. So you can now see how if it were hair like mine, I can just use this to work on the edges. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess I was a little bit too specific to your hair, but like when I had longer hair and other people I know with longer hair,
yep,
it kind of droops down their side and interweaves a bit in a very frustrating way to mask.
Here, let me find the photo and I can show you another technique. Give me 1 second. I'm going to show you a completely different technique, but I think it hopefully will answer your question. So this photo work, great. So I have this photo here.
There we go. Yeah, that's
yeah,
the right idea.
Perfect. So for something like that, what I would do is I would get a photo that's shot up against a background like this one. By the way, side note, if you're going to follow this technique and you're like, where the heck am I going to find pictures that look like that? What I recommend is going into Adobe Stock, going into the free section, and you can just type isolated model or something like that. And then you can find models on an isolated background. Maybe you can like this woman would probably work. Maybe type in woman actually, because we're looking for like long hair to make the brush that we're going to make. Yeah, so one of these could potentially work, right? Like it might take some trial and error, but find a woman that has long hair, kind of like this photo. And if you go through Adobe Stock under the free section, it's completely free. But basically,
I would imagine you'd want hair similar to the subject you're trying to.
So yes, but not necessarily, and you'll see why in a moment. So ideally yes, but let me show you what I'm gonna do, and then ask me if that didn't answer the question. What I will do in that situation is I would just use the crop tool and just crop everything. Let me remove the. Let me set it so that I can just adjust freehand the crop. So basically something like this, right? Where the only thing I'm concerned about is the hair. I really don't care about the rest of her body. I just really want to make that into a brush. So what I can do now is go into the channels panel and use a method called a channel pool or a channel-based selection, which is basically a selection made out of a channel. We have 3 channels, red, green, and blue. Click on all of them and see which one gives you the most contrast between the foreground and background, in this case, the blue channel. So I can click and drag the blue channel into the new layer icon to create a copy of that channel. So now I'm going to, and this is where it might be a little confusing, a little counterintuitive. I'm going to press Control-I to invert because I want the hair to be white and the background to be black. White is what we're going to keep. So I want to keep the hair. Then I can go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and then just make sure I crush the blacks like so. And then just, this is going to be my brush, this right here. And another thing that you can do is go into the dodge and burn tool. The dodge tool brightens pixels. The burn tool makes them darker. So you can select the burn tool and then the range of pixels, make that the shadows so that when you paint, you only paint over the shadows, the darkest pixels, and you don't really affect the brighter ones like so. I think this could work. I'm just going to double check by going into the curves adjustment layer and then just dragging up to really bring those pixels up like so. And what I can do now is create a brush out of this. But before I do, I need to actually make pixels. So if you hold, here's a trick for you. Like this is like, just so you to throw out keyboard shortcuts is not necessary. But you see how the channels panel has a number here, control number 6. If you add the Alt key to that, and that's Option Command on the Mac, if you add the Option or Alt key to this shortcut, it'll make a selection out of the white pixels. So Control, Alt, and then number 6, and it makes a selection. If you don't remember that, just hold Control or Command and click on the channel thumbnail. It does the same thing. But anyway, when you have your selection active, click on RGB to bring that back, go back into the layers panel and just create a solid color and make it black and disable the bottom layer there. And you know what? I'll just duplicate it just to make it twice as intense. And you can duplicate it as many times as you want to make it more intense if you want, but this is good. Then go into Edit and select Define Brush Preset. Again, give it whatever name you want, but now we have a brush that literally paints. Let me go to the brush here and make sure I have the right brush selected here. That one right there. That paints that. And I know it looks terrible because it's so close and so zoomed in, but if we make the brush smaller and when we paint, it's going to start looking better. And I'm still making the brush smaller here. And it all depends on the image that you're going to be working with, but you can see now that when you paint on the edges, you get a much more realistic effect. So let me find the picture here where we can use this. I know I have another photo here of a lady we could probably use.
While you're looking for it, you're getting a lot of kudos regarding that technique. Dennis says channel pulls are super useful for masking and a lot of other things as well, and just concurs with you on that.
Awesome. Really cool Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So how do we apply that to say Keanu Reeves with a long hair John Wick,
Sure. So we'll assume this is Keanu Reeves, this lady. And if we wanted to apply that to here, I'm just putting a background just so it's easier to see. Without a background, it's very difficult to see. So, and let me just work on the mask a little bit. I guess I'm gonna have to work a little more than I intended. As you know, it's very difficult to, select some of these pixels on the edges. So a lot of times it's just easier to, just get rid of them and paint your own in. And I'm going a lot quicker than I normally would here, but I think you'll get the point. I'm just going to paint the edges like so. And what I can do now is create a new layer, go back into that brush we just created. This one here. And on this new layer, I can, let me say, paint that in. Okay, it needs to be a lot smaller.
And can I just commend you on the file name? Because what the heck?
Oh, that was an Adobe stock photo.
Are you for real? Fitness,
Yeah.
Sports girl fashion, sportswear. I'm not even going to try to read all of that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it came right out of Adobe stock. But anyway, so I'm using the left and right bracket keys to resize my brush. Also, something new, like in Photoshop, I think 2020 or something like that. If you use the left and right bracket keys, you can also rotate your brush. So you can, come in here, and it's not going to be a perfect match, right? Because it's obviously a different photo. But, I can just, let me put that layer behind her like so. And I can just select the color of her hair and, rotate the brush more, paint, maybe make it smaller, rotate it again, paint. But you get the idea. See the edges that it's making now, the before and the after, see that? And I know it's not perfect, but again, you can make adjustments. You can do several things. You can create a layer mask, and on that layer mask, you can hide the pixels that are not going to work. Like right up here, these are not going to work, so I can hide those. These down here are not going to work, so I can hide these. So that's the result. Also, since this is just a regular pixel layer, now we can do really cool things like go into like edit and puppet warp, and then we can just create these pins, and I'll hide the mesh so that you can see. And now I can distort this. See how I can now control the hair and just control how the edges are going to look. If you hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac, you get that circle overlay, and you can rotate. See how I'm rotating now? And just adjust the edges as best as you can. So this is more or less how you would use that technique to generate edges that look more realistic. And we took it from an actual photo. So theoretically, it's quote unquote real.
That's fantastic. And she actually looks like she's been working out now, not just a perfect little model sitting there.
Exactly.
Scott Valentine. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask.
No. Go ahead. What's
a
the
follow-up from that? You have such a great command of all of the techniques. Scott Valentine wants to know, he'd like to hear about your brush management scheme, considering how easy it is to make thousands of these brushes and keep track of them.
Definitely. There's two things. So, I mean, as you can see, there's, not clicked on the wrong thing. I wanted to click on this. As you can see, I have a whole bunch of stuff, even something called like I have a lot. Luckily for us, in newer versions of Photoshop, you can now just type in, like if you're searching for something. So if I'm looking for like a grass brush, I know I have these here. But something that I also recommend people is to take advantage of the libraries panel. Because in the libraries panel, you can actually create your own library that just holds all your favorite brushes, right? So from here, you can create a new library and just, call it my favorite brushes, click on create. And when you're when you're creating a brush, you can just drag it in there after you're done. So for example, this dust brush, if that's one of my favorites, I can just drag it in there into that library and there it is. So if I log into Photoshop with another account, or I can send this to like the entire chat right now by generating a link and they can have access to these brushes, I could do that. There's a lot of things you can do. So I would recommend saving and managing your brushes in the libraries panel. So like you can have all your brushes in the, I keep clicking on that button. You can have all your brushes here, just like I do. I have hundreds of brushes. I have a ton of brushes, and then search for them on this search bar. But your favorite ones, I would recommend just putting them in a libraries panel and have like 10 or something, the ones that you use the most often. And again, they will be shared across all your devices. You can create a link and share it with somebody. And if you want to use them, you can just click on it. Photoshop will automatically activate it. And then, you can paint with them. So now there's like, dust or whatever around there.
Excellent. Thank you.
I hate to say this, but some of the things that you were showing, Jesus, we could not see. Of this last portion, we could not see your brushes or the library or whatever you were showing. Just the image of the young lady.
Interesting. So you can't see the libraries panel here on the right?
We see create new library, but if it's a secondary window that popped up on top, we're not seeing it. That's true.
I'm seeing it okay.
Okay.
I'm dual monitor if that makes a difference.
So in case it wasn't obvious or visible, I clicked on the flyout menu and then clicked on create new library. And then from here, I created the library. Was that visible this time?
Only up to create new library.
Right.
Okay.
That's where it stops.
Yeah. And then and then the library was created. And then what I did is clicked on the brushes panel here, and I just dragged a brush, from my brushes panel into the library. I don't know if that's visible or not. When I drop it, it just
brushes panel.
Yeah, your panels aren't visible because you're sharing just the Photoshop window.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Can I share the entire window?
Sure.
You just have to share your entire monitor.
Yeah, that would do it.
Okay. It says that I'm sharing my entire screen. That's weird. Let me stop and reshare again just to be sure. Okay. It says I'm sharing the entire screen, but can you guys see the brushes panel popping up here?
We're still waiting for it to generate.
No problem.
It's a black screen right now.
Okay. Let me know when it comes on. It says I'm sharing.
It's the cursor wiggling around a black screen.
Uh-oh. It looks like we might be having some issue. Let me.
Red dot in the upper right corner.
Yeah, it says here that I'm sharing. Let me stop again and I'll like restart Photoshop. Maybe that'll do it. Give me 1 second.
And it's been known to have issues with Zoom, so we understand.
No worries. Let
Evil
me just.
spirits.
Okay, so Photoshop is starting back up, and hopefully it'll show this time. No?
Just black.
Interesting. Yeah, it says I'm sharing the entire screen.
Everything. I was seeing everything. I was seeing your brushes. I was seeing everything when you were presenting.
Okay.
We were seeing your brushes that you were rendering with, but we weren't seeing the brush panel. Were you seeing that, Lori? The brush panel itself? Yeah, I wasn't seeing that.
I was seeing brush panels sometimes, but I'm not sure I was seeing them all the time.
Right.
Because I think I was noticing they were not there when other people were. I'm not sure. I know I was seeing him at when he was processing the hair, and darker and lighter and layering it. And I saw that going on, and I saw you wiggling it around with the puppet tool. But I don't remember seeing any brushes when other people were commenting later. So
yeah, to me, I only saw his main screen. I didn't see any of his panels. All of his panels were black.
That's weird. And now it's not coming back on, right? Because it says I'm sharing my entire screen and it just shows black. Correct?
It's just black. Let's try going back to just the Photoshop.
Should I? Well, let me try doing that again and see what happens.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everybody. We understand about the technology.
his picture's coming through okay as far as I can tell.
It says here, my screen sharing is
I see it talking right now.
Hold
in
on.
front of a microphone with headphones on.
Yeah.
And a second screen is black. You have started screen sharing.
But it has not actually started. We're just getting the
should I log out and come back in?
Maybe just to be on the safe side. And while you're doing that, Daniel, if you like, we can go ahead and do the raffle at this portion.
Sure. I'm going to log right out and come right back in. So yeah, that might be a good time to do that.
Sounds good.
Well, let's get that.
And Daniel, you're welcome to share. You can go ahead.
Yeah, let me just put it together. I wasn't ready yet, but
oh no, sorry. Okay. And Scott, it's not your fault. We understand. This happens. So let's see. Maliva, good to see you. Glad you joined. Ivan, thank you for joining. Gina, thank you for jumping in. Lee, we see you. Thank you. I was going to run a poll and say, what did you think was your favorite tip? But we only got one tip in so far. So we'll see.
Okay, I'm ready to do it.
Okay, let's go for it. You should be able to share as well.
We supposed to be seeing a wheel or
No, you are. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
onion.
Right. It needs that game show music to go along with it. James, congratulations, James. You are our first winner for tonight. Are you here? Are you here? Let me see. James is not here tonight. So he did not join.
What if you don't see your name on the list?
Did you do a registration with a ticket?
I thought I bought an extra ticket.
Yeah. It's no big deal. It's really no big deal.
Send me a PM and I'll go over that.
Okay.
Did I?
He's debating. Now I'm a little bit concerned because I want to make sure Jesus can get back in. Andrew wants to know, Daniel, are you in Bermuda or Jamaica?
No.
Would be nice. And he's trying to remind you to make sure you put your sunscreen on.
I ran into Andrew today, actually,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
just randomly.
LA is a small town.
So what's the prize that he won?
A year of Creative Cloud.
She said, wait, put my name back in. Let's see. Oh, and I can do that. Andrea says she wants to give you guys an idea of what the finished post looks like. Let me see. Where is it? Where is it? Let's do this. And here is Jesus. He's coming back in. And for anybody that wanted a quick look, a quick peek at what the finished post looked like, this is what Andrea was working on. She had a Women's History Month, celebrate the inspiring women in your life. She did use the same background that she used in her demonstration, but a different photo on the bottom. And just, you're able to put these kinds of things together in literally just a matter of minutes using those Adobe Express templates. So I just wanted to say thank you again to Andrea for sharing that. And we appreciate it. We're going to see if Jesus is good to go. He's joined back in.
Hey,
Let's see. There we go.
let's see. Should I continue sharing my screen and see if that works?
Yes, let's go for it.
Let's do it.
Okay. There's Photoshop. And
Looks
there's the
good.
brushes panel. We see it.
All right, fantastic.
Thank you.
Should I continue?
Yes, please do.
Yeah, so we're going to move to something else. But before I do, I just want to quickly recap the brushes thing in case people missed it. From the libraries panel, I was mentioning that you can click on the flyout menu and create a new library where you can give it whatever name you like. The name that I chose was my favorite brushes. And with the brushes panel open, you can select any brush you like and just drag it into the libraries panel. And you can see now I have 3 brushes in here. And this is where I keep my favorite brushes, but I do keep them all in the brushes panel here as well. So they're all there, but my favorite ones are usually in a library. Awesome.
Excellent.
So I know one of the things that I talked about in the description for the session was BlendIf. It's one of my favorite methods of blending images and pixels together in Photoshop. So let's talk a little bit about BlendIf. This is going to be just an overview, but hopefully it gives you insight of how the tool works and how you can use it. So I have this graphic here. It's just a gradient that goes from black to white, and this circle gradient that again goes from black to white. And the way that BlendIf works is by double-clicking to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window, or with the layer selected, you can click on the FX icon and go into blending options. From here, you have access to the BlendIf sliders right here, BlendIf, current layer, underline layer. Current layer is the layer that you're on. Underline layer are the layers below the layer that you're on. With the current layer sliders, you can hide pixels based on their brightness. With the underline layer, you can bring up pixels based on their brightness. So let me show you how that works. With the black point selected, I can just drag this over to the right and notice how that circle starts disappearing. That's because we're telling Photoshop that any pixel that is this shade of gray right here, which is a gray value of 122 or darker, will become invisible. And if I keep going to the other side, I can pretty much make almost all pixels disappear. See that? With the white point slider here, I can drag this to the left and the opposite happens. Now I'm telling Photoshop that if it's a value of 123, this shade of gray here or brighter, to make that invisible. And this creates a very sharp edge. But if I want a smoother transition between invisible and visible pixels, I can hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, and click to split these in half and create a smooth transition between invisible and visible pixels. What this means now is that if that any pixel that is white all the way up to this light shade of gray will be invisible. Then any pixel from this light shade of gray to this shade of gray will have a transition from invisible to visible. And once it gets past this shade of gray and it becomes darker, then it'll show at 100%. With the underline layer sliders, you bring pixels up. So when I drag the black point to the right, you can see how I'm bringing up the pixels. It's probably more clear on the left-hand side here. The reason that the top half of the circle disappear and the bottom half is because it also takes into account the gray background that it's on. But with the white point slider, you can kind of see that. See how it's just pushing those pixels that are below the current layer. They're pushing them up so we can see them. And again, you can hold Alt and Windows, Option and the Mac, and click and split them in half to create a smooth transition. So BlendIff really allows you to blend layers together in creative ways. There's so many ways in which you can use BlendIff. This is just one example. So if you create a solid color layer, fill it with, whatever color you want, and I can now change it to maybe hard light, and then double click to the side of the layer here, I can bring the underlying layer slider to the right to hide this effect on all the darker pixels. Hold Alt and Windows, Option on the Mac, and click, and drag this over so that blue is only affecting the side of his face. So now it seems like there's a light shining on him, a blue light. And if I want to make this even more realistic, well, then I can go into the portrait image here, go into Select, Subject, and with the subject selected, I can create a layer mask on that layer. So now it really does seem like a blue light is hitting his face. And since this is a solid color fill layer, this could be any color now. So it could be red or, whatever color you want. And obviously you might want to adjust the fill or opacity to control the brightness of that light. Again, this is just one example of how you can use BlendIff. Also, BlendIff works with color. So we have this circle here. And when I double click to the side of the layer to bring up the BlendIff sliders, I have a drop down. We were working with the gray option, but I have red, green, and blue. What does that mean? Red, green, and blue. Well, those are the channels that make up your RGB images. If you go into the channels panel, you can see them here: red, green, and blue. Notice that they're black and white. And what this means is that if there is white on the channel that you selected, that means that there's a lot of light in that color. In other words, in this channel, there's going to be a lot of red light here. The dark sides means that there is no light of that color in that channel. It'll give you the opposite color. So the opposite color of red is cyan in RGB. So when I enable the RGB image, you can see the red parts on top, the cyan parts at the bottom. In the green channel, just by looking at black and white, we can deduce that there's a lot of green light on the lower left. And on the top right, there is no green light. We'll have the opposite color, which is magenta. And sure enough, when I enable the RGB image, you can see green at the bottom, magenta on the other side. In the blue channel, we have a lot of light, blue light on the bottom right, and no blue light on the top left. So that means we have blue here and we have the opposite of blue on this side. The opposite of blue is yellow. When I enable the RGB, you will see that correlation, blue and yellow. Great. So how does that help us with BlendIff? Well, with BlendIff, we can select the channel like red and notice that we have black and we have white. Remember, white is white means that there's a lot of the white areas on the red channels means that there's a lot of light of that color, red. And the black areas means that there is less red light, meaning cyan. So when I drag the white point to the left, notice that the top half of the circle disappears. And it only leaves, when I go to the other side, it only leaves the opposite, which is cyan. If I drag the opposite side here, the black point where there is no red light, the other half of the circle disappears. See that? And I can do the same thing with all the other channels. If If I drag the white point, it'll make the green light disappear. And if I drag the black point, it'll make the opposite color, which is magenta, disappear. And by now you can probably guess what will happen in the blue channel. The white point makes the blue pixels disappear, and the black point makes the opposite, which is yellow, disappear. And of course, you have the Alt key on Windows. That's the Option key on the Mac. If you hold that key and click, you can create a smooth transition between invisible and visible pixels. Again, there's so many ways in which you can use that information. One of the techniques that you can use is by making a sky replacement. So we have that sky and this photo, and I think this sky is much more dramatic, and I want to apply it to this photo. If we go into the channels panel and we click on the RGB channels, we can see that the blue channel pretty much has the sky as completely white because it's blue, and the foreground, it's not necessarily black, but pretty dark. So we can use this as a mask. So I can go into my channels panel, or I'm sorry, my layers panel here, and I can go into the blending options and go into the blue channel. Remember, in the blue channel, the white part was the sky. So I can go into the white slider here and drag this over to the left, and it reveals the sky right behind it. And since I want to have smooth transitions, no sharp edges, I'll hold Alt on Windows, Option in the Mac to create a smooth transition, and I can split these points in half. Now I can go into my sky image with the move tool. I can move that around and notice that it does a pretty good job in creating that mask. So all I need to do now is just find a good area to place the clouds. Maybe this is good, maybe that works, and you can see the result. Now, notice the layer thumbnail. The layer thumbnail still shows the original sky. This is a blend. I'm not actually hiding or deleting pixels. I am hiding them, but I'm not actually creating transparency is really what I'm trying to say. So that means that if I change the blend, I will change how the transparency works. This is going to be a crazy adjustment, but just bear with me. If I make a crazy adjustment, you'll notice that the blend changes. The blend changes, so then this is not actual transparency. If you want to create actual transparency, what you can do is right-click on the layer and convert it into a smart object. Once you do that, look at the layer thumbnail. You can see the transparency checkerboard. So now I'm dealing with actual transparency. And if I create a curves adjustment layer, clip it to the layer below, I can adjust this all day long without actually affecting the blend. So you can create some pretty cool effects. So for example, maybe you can create, I don't think I have a sunset photo actually, but you can create almost like a backlit sunset photo. Let me see if I have a sunset here that we could drop in there. Maybe this photo can work. I don't know. We'll see. I wasn't planning on showing a sunset, but I guess this is where we're at now. The point is that we have our sunset image. It's not going to be perfect, but I think you'll get the idea. And there's like this crazy giant motorcycle guy there, but I think it.
Flip it.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, if I flip it, maybe it'll hide him behind the barn or something. Yeah, right. But anyway, I mean, again, I think you guys get the idea. Or maybe I can use another photo here. Maybe like one of these might work better. But the
hard part is trying to match up the angle of the light in the background image to the lighting in the foreground.
That's 100%, and especially because it's a different time of day, it's going to be very difficult. But it is what it is. It's going to be, this is probably going to be one of the better results. But the point is if you really wanted to do that, maybe this is not the best foreground image. I probably shouldn't go into this, but if this is a job that I got, and somebody wanted me to change the time of day like this, something else that I would do is I would probably create a new layer, go in here, and then try to hide all the shadows in the scene so that I could then create my own. Or, I mean, depending if I needed my own. In this case, I wouldn't need my own. I would come in here and then hide all these shadows where they wouldn't work just because it's a different time of day. And if need be, create my own shadows. So if the new background has the sun here, the shadows will be coming towards us. So the way I would do that, again, probably shouldn't go into this because I wasn't planning on showing it, but the way that I would do that is probably making a selection like this. And it's not going to be perfect, but I think you'll get the idea. Selection like that, and creating a new layer, filling it with not necessarily black. I'll select a dark color already found in the image, like that dark green, like so. Change the blending mode to multiply, transform. Here's a trick for you. You can drag this point around if you want, or you can click on this icon here and then click on the little center box there on the bottom, right click and select flip vertical, and it flips it like that. And then just kind of match it as best as I can, maybe adjust the perspective a little bit so that it matches a little bit. But the point is that I would have to change the shadow so that it works now with the new background, if that's what I wanted to do. And it'll take some fine tuning to get it right, but I think you get the idea.
Can I ask a quick question? Did I see an off-center axis on that color wheel? Like it was a little bit to the right of the center?
I'm sorry, which color wheel?
The color wheel, you were picking colors.
Yes.
Back.
That one?
I would swear the axis is a little below, and
probably it probably is off-centered. To be frank with you, what I did is I just created a gradient and then just did a circle. And
you created your own. Okay.
Yeah. So I probably wasn't pixel perfect on trying to get the center.
No.
But good eye, very good eye.
It was bugging me.
Man, very good eye.
I was wondering, why would Adobe have a cattywampus color wheel?
No. That was me. Yeah, that was me. Good eye. Very good eye. So this is just a few ways in which you can use BlendIf. Like I said, there's hundreds of ways. So I would highly recommend spending some time understanding how it works, because it really does save you in a lot of projects when you're trying to blend things that are not quite working together, especially on things like, again, not planning on showing this, but I think I have something here. Let me see. I mean, I don't know if this will work, but, especially on something like this, where it's like very difficult to select. I know you can definitely, change the blending mode, obviously, to screen if you wanted to. But if you have a situation where the blending mode wouldn't work, BlendIf could definitely, help you out and make your own mask that way. So it really just depends. Oops, I chose the wrong slider. There's situations where you just can't use or the blending mode won't work, especially if you need actual transparency. Like a lot of times when you're working on something, you might realize that, yeah, I can definitely change the blending mode to screen and it'll work great. But if the project requires it to be like transparency, not a blend, then BlendIf will be great, because then you can come in here, convert it to a smart object, and then maybe, I don't know, apply like a layer style to make those snowflakes white. Like so, and then just, now you have actual transparency and it's not a blend. So that's another way in which you can use BlendIf. I don't know if that made any sense, and that was a little more advanced, so I apologize if that was not something I should have gone into, but I get ideas in my head and I want to share them with you guys. Any questions before I move on to the next example? Bless you.
Oh.
I think we're good. We don't have any questions in the chat. So
okay, let me just
ready to roll.
Cool. I accidentally closed my folder earlier when I restarted Photoshop and actually restarted the computer just to be sure. And now I have to open up my folders again. So give me 1 second. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite tools to make composites in Photoshop, which is the perspective warp. And we're going to look at several examples on how you can use it. So I have this cube here that's already been masked out. It's just a very simple mask, nothing special, but clearly that box, that crate does not belong in this scene. This is not a perspective tutorial, or stream, but just to give you an example, when you are compositing in Photoshop and you want to make it seem like something is sitting on the ground plane, you need to know where the horizon line of that ground plane is. The ground plane is just simply the surface where the object is sitting. And if you follow all the parallel converging lines, they'll end up at a vanishing point. That vanishing point sits on a horizon line. Right above that horizon line, you'll have the sky. In other words, where the ground plane meets the sky, that's where the horizon line is. And that's where all your converging lines meet. Also, when you're compositing, sometimes you don't need to do all that work. You just kind of have to see the object that you're working with. And the way that I like to think about it is, if you have an object and you can see the bottom of it, that means that it's above the horizon line. So notice how the boxes, we can see the bottom of these boxes. So that means that the boxes are floating above the horizon line. If this was a tall building, and just imagine it was one structure instead of multiple rectangles, we can't see the top. So then, and we can't see the bottom, but we know that the top will be above the horizon line because it's obvious the horizon line's here in the middle and it's above it. But if it was like an actual, like a car floating, or, a structure that, had something coming out of it and we can see the bottom of it, we wouldn't know that the horizon line is below it. And if we have something that's on the ground and we can see the top of it, then we know that the horizon line is above it. So in this case, in the image that we're working with, if we imagine that there's no buildings and that there's no trees, there's nothing, just the ground plane and just the sky, where do they meet? They probably will meet right about here. You can kind of see it, right? So we know the horizon line is there. We have this crate, we can see the top part of the crate. So then we can either drag this crate way down so that the perspective matches, but that's not what we want. We want the crate to be more in the center, like so. So in that case, we need to change the perspective of the crate so that it matches the scene. To do so, there's a tool in Photoshop called the perspective warp. You can right-click on the layer, convert it to a smart object to work non-destructively. A smart object is a container that can hold one or more layers, and it allows you to apply non-destructive adjustments, distortions, filters, and transformations. In other words, you can always come back and change it or delete the adjustment entirely, whatever you like. It's editable. So from the edit menu, you can go into the perspective warp, click and drag to create a grid. So this is going to be the right face of the crate, and you can use these points to match the edges, like so. You don't have to be precise. You can be somewhat loose, but try to get it as close as possible without spending too much time, I would say. When you create the second face, you'll notice that the edges will highlight in blue. When you release, those two edges will snap into place, and you only have to worry about the other side, like so. And same thing on this side. Click and drag, highlights in blue, release, snaps into place. Click and drag this one to the other side. It highlights in blue, release, snaps into place. So you only really have to worry about one point. So once this is there, you can click on the warp button. By the way, you can click on the buttons or use the keyboard shortcut. L for layout, W for warp. Pretty simple, right? L and W. Also, if you're on the layout option and you press the enter key, it will switch over to the warp option. But if you press enter again, it'll commit the changes. So you might want to use the keyboard shortcuts. I like keyboard shortcuts, so I try to memorize as many as I can, but you can definitely just click on layout and warp if you prefer. Once you're in warp, you can click and drag on these points to change the perspective of the object. So now I can try to create that illusion like this crate is actually sitting here. You can also hold shift and click and notice how it highlights in yellow. That just makes the lines straight and it constrains them so you can move them together. So you can make these adjustments to change the perspective of the crate and try to make it look more realistic. Obviously, for something like this, we might also need to do a contact shadow on the floor and maybe do a little bit of color matching. But the point of this example is that we can change the perspective of an object in Photoshop. As I mentioned before, creating a smart object keeps everything editable. Double-clicking on perspective warp will bring back the points and I can adjust them if need be. And let me open up another file. This is not the only thing this tool will allow you to do. If you have something like this, you can also use the perspective warp. Let me quickly make a grid like so and try to match the perspective as best as I can. And I'm looking at the lines here on the grid and also looking at the lines in the buildings just to try to get a a similar perspective. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but it needs to be close enough. So maybe drag this one higher. I'm trying to get as much as I can of the image there. Maybe this one even higher, like so. I think this is probably good enough. Yeah, this will be good enough. And then do the other side. Release when both sides highlight in blue, and try to adjust the perspective as best as possible. Again, don't have to be perfect, just close enough. Go into the warp option, and now I can change the perspective of this street. See that? See how I'm just changing the perspective? And obviously, the more extreme you go, the less realistic it looks. So you have, just a little range to change the perspective of something like this. And if you move it over, say this way a little bit, and we have a lot of transparency, there's a couple things you can do. You can either crop out the transparency, or in areas like the sky up here, you can just create a selection with the lasso tool, hold shift to add to the selection and select the area on top. And then use something like content aware fill to fill the top areas there. Press OK. And now the top areas are fixed or filled, but we were able to adjust the perspective of that street just by using the perspective warp. I should have done it in a smart object so I can show you the before and after. I didn't do that, but this is, but I just did it. So I went back so you could see what it looked like originally. Another thing you can do with the perspective warp is, let me open that up. So we have these steps here. And what I would recommend doing, if you wanted, imagine that you wanted to put a design like on these steps, you can of course use, let me open up something here so I could show you. I'm just gonna use this pattern. Just gonna copy it, edit, copy. So one of the things that you can do, nothing wrong with doing this, but I'll show you why I don't prefer it, is go into filter and select vanishing point, and then you can create your grid to match the perspective of something like so, right? And then you can drag another face by holding the control key, and then just, matching the perspective as best as you can. And then you can press Control V to paste the pattern in there. And now I can, place it into position like so, and I can press OK. I can change the blending multiply, and there's my pattern on the bricks, and it looks great. The downside is that this particular filter does not work with a smart object, so I can't edit this. I can't use it as a template to swap out that graphic with something else. So if I wanted to do that, if I wanted to have some sort of template where I can swap out the graphic, what you can do instead is create something that looks like this. I think this will probably be a good size, and I can just fill that with white, convert it into a smart object, double click on it. So now I can work with this. And if we look at the actual image, we have basically 2 top faces and 2 side faces. So then we could, create, we can go into view. Why am I blanking here? View guides, new guide layout. Here we go. And I can tell Photoshop to create guides for me to split this into different columns. So we can say something like 4 columns or something, and press OK. And just so that you can see what's going to happen here, I'm just going to fill some of these with black here, or whatever color that is. It doesn't have to be black, as long as they're different. And when I enable this, I'm actually going to rotate it so that we have the darker one on this side. The colors really don't matter, but it matters in the example so that you can see how it works. But I didn't have to rotate it. I'm only rotating it so that the black is on this side so that you can see it. So now I can go into Edit, Perspective Warp, and I can apply those grids like so. Oops, I didn't like that one. So I'm going to do that one again. And obviously you want to be more careful when you're doing this for real. I'm going quickly here to try to get more content in this stream. There we go. So no, oops, I didn't like that one either. I'll do it again. I just wanted to make sure that I got everything. Cool. This works. Now I can go into warp and I can match, and it's going to take some time. Again, I'm going to go fast as I can, but it's going to take some time for me to match these steps. It's not as easy as the previous example, but the advantage is that this is going to give me a template that I can edit. So if you're looking for a template, this method gives you more flexibility, but it takes a little bit longer to generate, to create. And I'm just trying to get this as best as I can, as fast as I can. And if you're having trouble seeing, you can always change the blending mode. I'll change it to multiply, and there we go. Much easier to see. And I'm just trying to make sure that it matches the perspective of these steps as best as possible. And I use the smart object so I can edit it if it's not perfect, if I realize that I made a mistake somewhere. But for the purposes of the stream, we'll just call this good, and I'll commit the changes. So there it is. That's my graphic. So now I can double click on here and I can just start populating it with content, right? So maybe I want that pattern there. And if you hold Alt on Windows, Option on the Mac, when the Move tool is active, you duplicate that layer. So I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll just clip it to the layer below so it only shows through there. And let me see if I have another pattern here. And then I have these patterns. So these patterns I'll just place at the bottom. And the patterns really don't matter. They're just to show you that you can put content there. I'll save, go back into my working document, and you can see how that appears on these steps. And that's the advantage of doing it the longer way, is that I now have a template and I can put whatever I want in here. I can, change my mind if I want to and just have it be that pattern, save, come back, and there it is. And I can even use the same technique we just learned, the blend if. I can go for the underline layer slider here on the white point to bring in some of that brightness. See that? Pretty cool. Maybe hide the effect from the shadows just to make it a little more oops, sorry, wrong slider. This one. Hide the effect from the shadows just to make it a little more realistic. But again, everything is in this smart object, so I can always come back and make changes to it, and it updates when I save. So that's the advantage of doing it this way. Remember, this is a smart object. Double click on perspective warp, and if I notice that I made a mistake, I can come in here and make an adjustment and commit the changes, and it applies them to the steps. Any questions?
Just seeing comments that it's very flexible. The perspective warp is very cool. Teresa says very cool also. So yeah, we're liking this one. This is a game changer.
Awesome. And you know what? I just thought about another thing you can do with it that I wasn't even prepared to show, but we'll show it. I don't know how big this image is. I'll make it smaller just so that Photoshop doesn't like crash on me or something, or we're streaming, so I'll keep it small. But another thing you can do with that tool is on a room like this, you can go into edit perspective warp, and same thing, follow the perspective of the room. I'm just going to move these like so. And again, I don't need to be perfect for the stream, but I need to be good enough so that it looks good. Looks pretty good. And I'll do the floor. And actually, I don't like it like this. Let me do it this way. Yeah. And then snap that one there. And then I can move this one here and I need to get all the pixels. Otherwise, it will distort the edges weird. So I have to maybe come all the way out here and then adjust this one so that it works as well. Something like this. And if we're doing that, might as well fix this one too. Maybe something like this will work. And then you can click on warp, And when you click on this, notice how we can rotate the room now, give the room a completely different perspective. So maybe if you have a room that almost works for your composite, but not really, and you can, just rotate it a little bit. And when I commit the changes, you can see the difference. This is before and after. So we can completely rotate and spin rooms. Well, not completely, but you get the idea. You can cheat a little bit if that's what you need. And obviously you are going to have some transparency. And if that's the case, then you can create a new layer with the clone tool. I would use the clone tool just because I can control the detail. I can just paint in the planks or whatever it is, just so that it matches the perspective. And I can do that all throughout the room, of course. So the perspective tool does a lot more than you might expect it to do.
I'm totally envisioning all the home decor type
Exactly
websites and tools that allow you to change out color schemes and things like that, utilizing these kinds of tools. So
for sure.
Saeed and Anna said, thank you for repeating it, and wow.
I'm glad people are enjoying it.
Excellent.
Let me now open up this image and just show some. Sorry, I didn't. Well, it doesn't matter. We do it on this document, but I wasn't planning on doing that. I'm just going to close some of these just to keep things more manageable. And let me open up this document. So we have this document here. And this document has a harsh light, whether you like it or not. It's not really relevant for the tutorial, but let's just imagine that you're working with a document that has harsh light that you want to neutralize. In other words, you don't want this red light all over our model here. How can we fix that? We can actually use a tool that is designed for something completely different, but will give us the result that we want. If you go into filter, neural filters, you will have access to something called the colorize feature, which is used to colorize black and white photos. This is not a black and white photo, but when we enable colorize, you can see what happens. See that? It removes the color cast, and now we have a neutral photo. Output it as a new color layer. When you click on that, it's going to look horrible and it might freak you out. That's okay. No worries. Just make sure you output to a new layer and press OK. And now everything looks good, but we have this color layer here. What that allows us to do is to create a new layer and press Control-Alt-G on Windows, Command-Option-G on the Mac to clip this layer to the layer below. And now we can make corrections wherever the AI made a mistake. For example, her shirt was green. The AI thought it was white. Well, we can fix that if we wanted to. We can select the brush tool with the brush tool active. And let me make sure I just select the regular brush here. Hold the Alt key to temporarily enable the eyedropper tool. So select green like so. And in this blank layer, and I'll label it so we know what this is. This is the shirt. I can paint on the shirt. And now it's green again. And not, again, I'm going super fast here, so it's not like I'm going to be perfect, but you'll get the idea. So just paint the shirt back in. It does a really good job. So now the shirt's the right color, but also notice we have more mistakes. Notice that her skin didn't go into the mesh here on her sleeve. Well, we can create another layer, Control-Alt-G to clip it to the layer below. By the way, for those of you that don't know, clipping simply means that the layer below controls the visibility of the layer on top. So in this case, it's also applying the blending mode. The blending mode set to color. So even though these layers are set to normal, because they're clipped to this layer, they also have the color blending mode. So on this layer on top, I'll call it skin, and I can select her skin tone and then just paint over those areas like so. And you can continue repeating this process until everything has the right color. For example, the graffiti is blue behind her hair, so we can create a new layer. And I don't know how to spell graffiti, so sorry about that if I misspelled it. But I can select blue back here, and then just on this layer, just paint with it with blue, like so. And obviously, this brush is harsh, so I might want to reduce the hardness to 0. and try to make it look more like the actual graffiti, of course. But the point is that now I have these layers that fix any imperfections that the AI did. And the way that most people do it is they apply all these changes to this color layer that Photoshop outputted. And although that's not necessarily bad, it doesn't offer you flexibility, right? Because if you're going to fix the shirt and you paint on it with green, and then you realize that's not the right green, or you don't like green, you already painted on this layer. You can't I mean, at this point, I can't undo that, obviously. But if I were to come back tomorrow or another day, I wouldn't be able to undo that. I will have to start all over again. So in the way that I did it, in a separate layer, if I don't like this green, I can go into image, adjustment, hue and saturation, and then just change it to another color, increase the saturation, the lightness, whatever I want to do. But it keeps everything more flexible. So that's why I like to separate things into layers so that I don't have to start from scratch if I need to make an adjustment.
Is it possible to make a pre-selection, say just the girl out of the original before applying the neural filter, the colorize?
So for that, so the answer is yeah, but what I would do is I would just do it. I always like to get more than what I need. So I would just do the whole thing. And if you just wanted to, for whatever reason, neutralize the girl, but not the background, then I'm just going to do it super fast. I would do everything the way I did it, and then just go into select subject to select her. And then with her selected, and I know the selection is not perfect, I would just create a mask on the output color layer. So the background keeps that color, but she's neutral, if that made sense. And the flexibility of doing it this way, and because I'm always thinking about flexibility, right? Because if I decide to apply the filter just to a specific area in the beginning and I'm wrong or made a mistake, I have to start from scratch to fix it. And doing it this way makes it so that if I made a mistake on this mask, I can always come back and fix this mask, right? I can always fix it if I need to. Paint with black to hide, paint with white to reveal. So it offers me that flexibility of being able to fix it without having to start from scratch. That's why I would have not selected the girl and just apply the filter to either the background or her, because I don't have that flexibility anymore. So I would apply it to everything, and then with a mask, choose what to keep and what to hide.
Excellent, excellent. And Saeed says, goodbye, median filter and a lot of work to neutralize the colors. This is a great tip to add in.
Well, I mean, to be completely frank, it doesn't always give you a perfect result. There's always some manual labor. The way I like to think about the neural filters, as you just saw, is to get me 80% of the way there, and then use the tools that we all know and love for that extra 20%.
Excellent, excellent. Does anyone else have any questions for Jesus?
Yeah, any questions?
I'm not seeing anything. And I'm going to throw this in while we're waiting for questions to come in.
Yeah.
So you guys, give us your feedback. What was your favorite tip of the evening? So we've got the scattered edge custom brush masking, the blend if selections and techniques, the perspective warp, and the neural filters colorize option. So people are putting in their answers.
Can we pick them all? They were all great.
That was cool. There was definitely something that was useful from every single tool. It's something that is like a manageable step. It's not like it's a really difficult process. So that's excellent.
So I'm gonna show. Oops. Let me show you what I have here.
Okay.
It's a folder with a bunch of images. And what they are is of the Louvre Museum in Paris. So I was there a couple of years ago. And as you could imagine, with any tourist attraction, there's a lot of people, just walking through the museum. And I try to go early to try to get the fewest amount of people as possible. But the point is there's people there, and I want a photo of the Louvre Museum without people. And Photoshop has a feature called stack modes that allows you to take multiple images and apply some crazy math to it. One of the modes, one of the crazy math algorithms that you can apply is called medium, which allows you to essentially keep pixels that are constant and make pixels that are not constant disappear. So if you could imagine that you set up a tripod and shoot a photo of a building, the building will always be there. People and cars and whatever walking through are not going to be constant. So Photoshop will actually remove people from your photos if you use this technique. The downside for me in this case, if you notice, I didn't have a tripod, so I'm bouncing around. See, and no matter how straight you stand and how still you try to be, you're still breathing. There's still wind. There's still things going on. So it's impossible to be perfectly still like you would with a tripod. So that's one of the downsides in this example. Also, it would have been better if I had an actual camera and all I had was my Google Pixel phone. So this was shot with a Google Pixel. But in Photoshop, we can bring all these images and make them look much, much better. So if you go into Filter, Scripts, and choose Statistics, it'll bring up the Statistics window. From here, you can use Files or Folder. I have my folder here, and let me just copy the file location just because it'll be easier than me navigating through my entire computer here. Louvre Museum, there it is, the Louvre Museum, and press OK. Photoshop will then load all those images into this box. Remember how I said that I didn't have a tripod? Well, I can tell Photoshop to attempt to automatically align source images. That median stack mode is right here, median. So make sure you select median and press OK. Photoshop will then open up all those images, put them inside of a smart object, and then apply that crazy math algorithm. And if everything works according to plan, the people will disappear. See that? And there's a couple issues. Number one is I was standing still, so we're going to have these corners that don't quite match. And even though it removed almost everyone, it still left, you know, people's legs and arms and stuff like that in random places. So to fix that, you can create a new layer, and with the spot healing brush tool or any photo retouching tool, you can remove the leftover arms or whatever. And I know there's a leg or something on this side, and spend your time just looking through your images to make sure that all those things disappear. It looks like there's another arm or something here, and I can remove that on the right side. And there you go. And also for those of you who have eagle eyes, and I know some of you do, because I think it was Doug, if I'm not mistaken, who noticed that the circle was off-centered. You probably noticed that the clouds have an issue. And remember what I said earlier, Photoshop keeps the things that are constant. Well, clouds are not constant. Water is not constant. Flags are not constant. So you will need to fix those. So if you double click on the layer thumbnail, it'll show you all the images that make up that smart object. And you can see that the clouds are moving. So to fix that, just find a photo that has the clouds that you like. In this case, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to highlight with a selection, the top part of the image, Control-C to copy. Then I can come here. If I just press Control-V to paste, Photoshop will paste in the center. And that's not what I want, because now I have to align it. But if you press Control-Shift-V, it'll paste in place, and it'll place it in the top. Control-Shift-V. So now we have clouds that work, but we have another problem. Now we have a seam. To fix the seam, I'm going to click on the layer mask icon. And with the brush tool active, I'm just going to increase my brush size by tapping on the right bracket key. By the way, Shift and the bracket keys make your brush soft or hard. Those are the edges that we're talking about. You can see the preview here on the top left. Shift left bracket key to have a really soft brush, and I can just smooth out those edges by painting with black on a layer mask. And now I have no more seam, and that pyramid looks fantastic. Now I can take all these layers, right click, and convert them into a smart object. So now I can treat this photo as a single image. And I can go into Filter, Camera, Raw, Filter. From here, I can increase, whatever adjustment you want to do. So I can increase the contrast, maybe bring out the shadows a little bit to get more detail, decrease the highlights, add texture, clarity, whatever you want. It really is completely up to you. And just press OK when you're done making those changes. And the final step is to go into the crop tool and crop out any of those issues on the edges. And you might also want to rotate the image to straighten that horizon. And maybe we can place the pyramid right there, right on the third section here on the right. And that is our final result, just by using very simple tools in Photoshop.
So I see two questions.
Yeah.
Saeed asks, why not use the sky filter to generate a new sky instead of this particular process?
Okay. Yeah.
Question. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go back and look at that. So I don't need to generate a new sky in this case because we do have a sky that we can use, right? There it is. It's there. Now, for whatever reason you have a sky that you don't like, you're certainly welcome to do that. But in this instance, it wouldn't save us any time at all. I would need to go into, edit, sky replacement. Photoshop will, do its magic, replace a sky. If you like that sky better, then, great. By all means, use that. If not, you have to navigate through the different skies until you find something that works, something that you like. But then you have a couple issues now. Not necessarily issues, just things you have to make sure. You have to make sure that you have edges that work. Like I see some issues here. I would have to make sure if you hold Alt and Windows Option in the Mac and click, you can see your mask, right? So this is my mask and you can see those issues on the mask here. I will need to fix those issues before I use one of the skies that Photoshop generated. So there is more manual labor, nothing wrong with doing it that way. But in this case, I didn't have to worry about that because I already had a sky that was from this.
Consider you've got a wet pavement reflecting a sky that you already have.
Right. Exactly. There's a lot of things, especially a good point, especially if you choose a sky that has a different lighting. We can probably get away with some of the skies that we saw because it's similar color, similar clouds. You might be able to get away with it. But if we're changing the color of the sky now, and I think that was Doug who mentioned that, as he mentioned, we would have to worry about the puddles that you see, as well as creating more work. But, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be aware of those extra issues if you're going to replace the sky.
Okay. Dennis asks the next question, which is, where can I find something that explains those stacking modes that you're referring to?
Let me see if I can find it. If you type in, before I say it, yeah, I think I found it. If you type in, yep, I'll place the link in the chat, but I'll also say it. If you type in stack modes help X, it'll take you to Adobe's page that I just linked to in the chat, and you can see what the stack modes do. And for some reason, they don't have a description for all the stack modes. I'm not sure why that is, but you can read about them there if you like.
And that might be your next tutorial on your channel.
Definitely.
Excellent. Any other questions? And Ivan concurs.
By the way, this is completely not unrelated, but here's a tip for people. So this is HelpX is Adobe's, essentially manual for everything Adobe. So what I usually do for something is I'll type in HelpX, in this case, HelpX stack modes. And then usually the first result will get you right to HelpX, which is what Adobe, where Adobe puts out all their information on whatever tool. And here's an advanced tip. I don't know how many international people or people who speak multiple languages or English is not their first language. If you put a language code after adobe.com, for example, I know Spanish is MX, so /MX. So helpx.adobe.com/MX, and then the rest of the URL, it'll translate it to that language. So in this case, Spanish. And I know they have DE for German, I think. Yeah,
FR for French and so on.
Probably. Let's try FR. Yeah, yep. There you go. And I think Italian is IT. So, if English is your second language, this is a way in which you can get the information maybe more accessible to you.
And the Italian comes with pizza.
Oh, perfect.
Beverly says, I've used Maximum to aggregate star trail images that are stacked. So she's making use of that as well.
Yeah, and actually, now that she mentions star trail images, this stack mode median could also be very useful for removing noise in night photography. If you have like multiple photos, not even that many, like 3 or 4 of like the same night shot photo, and you use what I just use here, it'll just remove the noise from the image, because it looks, you can see how this image basically doesn't have any noise anymore. And the original one did. If I double click on here and just look at any one of these, there is definitely more noise than what the stack mode showed. So if you're doing any type of night photography or anything like that, or astrophotography, you can use this method to remove noise in your photos by shooting maybe 2 or 3 photos and then running it through the same process. It'll remove the noise.
Exactly. And Bradley, I saw earlier that you jumped in. Did you want to ask a question, Brad Smith?
I was wondering if we'd be able to contact you a little bit later on by email. I was wondering how much influence do you have with Adobe, because I've been having a large amount of problems trying to stay offline, because the work I do is government stuff and I can't be online, and I'm constantly having crashing issues because it's trying to touch the internet.
Not as much as I would like. To answer your question, I definitely do talk to Adobe all the time, but that doesn't mean they listen. It just means that they might reply with a thank you.
Is they just say, "Oh, well, you user voice," and I'm like, it's 15 years on user voice, the same exact problem.
Right. I mean, you can always contact me through my website or my email. And I believe if you click on that QR code, it might even show you my email. If it doesn't, my email is jr@photoshoptrainingchannel.com. jr@photoshoptrainingchannel.com.
Throw your information back up on the screen for us.
Oh, yeah. Did I close that? Yeah, I did, because I restarted my computer.
Sorry.
Is anybody else having profound customer service and technical support issues with Adobe lately?
No,
No.
we're good.
No.
I've been going in circles for literally months on some stuff.
Yeah, I have a laundry list of over 4,000 bugs in their newest releases since the beginning of the year. And one bug I actually can get into anybody's account, and they still have not listened to me about it.
Wow.
I've been trying to get people to listen for 2 months, and I get responses that are non sequiturs and have to start over again and talk to different people. I spent 3 hours today with a unscheduled support return call with somebody who didn't know what he was talking about, and had to get someone else to call me, and took them an hour to get a screenshot of some text uploaded to user voice. I got no idea if anybody's going to respond.
Scott adds for Brad that you should try going through your agency support system if possible. They'll have a different link for government support that's supposed to be dedicated to federal and state customers. So that may be.
I'm my own is the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been pushing me further and further down. And yeah, I contacted the India Adobe Illustrator team, and they just straight up don't want to implement any of the stuff that I've been needing. They took away a feature which lets me do measurements, and I was like, oh, now all of my measurements are gone in every document. Also, the thing with Pantone, that shot us in the foot big time. I don't think they realized what they did to the Army.
I think the Pantone thing was not of their doing. That was on Pantone.
It was 50-50. Yeah, it wasn't entirely Adobe.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It was Pantone all the way.
Yeah.
I was part of the team that helped investigate it. And then Pantone Colors decided to just not to sign a contract again. What I suggest, take it with a grain of salt and be open. Things are happening. It's a huge company. It's huge changes. You pick your battles, and then you just, I mean, it's not a bomb in the border, if something is not working with a pixel. So I think you guys should take it away. It's nobody's shooting you. Okay, it's a freaking pixel. So
they lost Army in the contract. Army is no longer using anything Adobe. They switched over to other platforms. Yeah.
Just for the
No,
interest of time, I want to make sure that we allow Jesus these last few minutes to go ahead and close out his presentation because he has, I think, one more demo.
Yeah, one more.
Okay, that'll work.
Why not? One
Thank
for
you, everybody.
funsies. Yeah, so I mean, as you guys know, I'm like really big into compositing. So here's a way of adding fire in Photoshop. You can of course use an image, and change the blending mode to screen if you would like. And I know this is probably not the best picture for that, but this is one way of adding a flame or fire to Photoshop. Another way is by using any tool to create a path. I like using the curvature pen tool. Select path, and I'll zoom in, and I'm just going to create a path along the area where I want my flame to appear. Then I can create a new layer, go into filter, render, and select flame. From here, the default option will be one flame along a path, but you can change it to number 5, which is multiple flames, various angles, and it creates that. And you can also randomize the length and adjust the length of your flame, and you can change the color of the flame if you like by clicking on this icon and choosing a color. For this example, I'm just going to leave it there and press OK, and Photoshop will generate that flame that you see there. I'm just going to go into the paths panel and click away so that we have that flame there. Here's another trick for you. You can create a new layer, change the blending mode to color dodge, then go into the blending options. And from here, this is very important, uncheck transparency, shapes, layer, and you'll see why in a moment. If I now go into the brush tool, and with a stuffed brush, I select a yellow like this, I can paint in, and it looks like that is getting hotter, as you can see there. Now, why did I do that checkbox? Why did I click on that transparency shapes layer checkbox? Well, if this is enabled, look at the difference. See the difference that makes? It just creates a much better blend. And this blending mode is one of 8 blending modes that reacts differently when you adjust opacity compared to fill. So if something is too intense, I would recommend using the fill slider to control the intensity rather than the opacity. Fill would just do a better job. And you can continue painting on this image to get a result that looks good to your eye. And of course, you can always combine that with an actual image to add maybe sparks or something like that. I just wanted to show you the flame generator and also show you that blending mode with that trick there. And for this to be realistic, of course, you would need to apply light to a lot of things, including the rest of the campfire, maybe on the subjects a little bit. And, you would have to spend some time just making sure the lighting works, but that will be for a different stream. For now, I just wanted to show you the flame generator inside of Photoshop.
Yeah, the flame. Cool. I did see this tutorial earlier that you posted. One of my questions is how do you scale the flames?
How do you, okay. So I actually painted on the same layer. Oh, no, I didn't. You can scale the flames just by pressing Control-T, commands you to transform and scale, or before, let me see, do I still have the path? Yeah, the path is still here. Or when you can, you create a layer and go into filter, render, flame, you can adjust the length here and press OK, and that will generate a longer flame.
Not necessarily longer, but density. Because those flames there's too many open denses to be unrealistic.
100%. So what I would do in that situation is just create multiple paths, or create a new layer. And even with the same path, I don't have to create a new one. I can go into render, flame, and then just adjust it so that it's not the same, just different. Press OK, and it will generate something that's similar but not the same, and then move it around and place it in a different area. Bring down opacities, maybe adjust blending modes just to make it look a little different, and maybe transform it. I mean, there's no specific way to do it, just within one particular layer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that should do.
Awesome. And actually, was trying to do something, but this path is annoying me. And what I was trying to do here is, maybe, adjust it like this and then place it somewhere else. And if you're going to do something like this, maybe I would also go into the hue and saturation and just maybe adjust the hue just a tad, so it's not 100% the same.
Teresa says this is her new favorite tip. Alan says, love the color dodge blend trick. That was really, really well done.
Awesome. Well, that's all I have for today, everybody. Does anyone have any questions before we leave the stream?
Anybody? And if you want, you can go ahead and put your contact and your channel information back up. Yeah.
Sure. That QR code will get everybody there. Photoshop training channel. And as I mentioned earlier, new podcast, Today's Creator, on YouTube and anywhere else where you can download podcasts. Video, obviously, on YouTube, and just audio on the other platforms, of course. And there it is. And my first episode was with my good friend Mark Heaps 4 days ago on AI art. Mark works for Grok, an AI company, and he has been a photographer, designer, has worked for Google and Apple. So he's the perfect person to listen to about these emerging technologies. He's very knowledgeable in this space.
Excellent. And I think we have about 34 potential new subscribers.
Fabulous. I would appreciate it very much.
From the sounds of it in the chat, that's everybody is
I've
really
been subscribed to him since like 2010-ish or 2011.
Then you're one of the first ones. I appreciate that.
Excellent. All righty. Well, everyone, we appreciate you coming out. Jesus, thank you again.
Thank you,
Always
Anissa.
fantastic to see you. Always fantastic to have you present with our group. Please, everybody, keep following him. Keep checking in with him. I see Hannah's got a hand up. Hannah, go for it. Oh, she's waving goodbye.
Oh, bye, Hannah. Good to see you. Thank you so much. And thank you for the text.
I'll go ahead. If Jesus, if you can stop your share real quick.
Yes. If
and
I
then
can
everybody
figure
can,
out how to do that, I will do it.
right at the top.
There we go.
And then everybody can wave goodbye.
Bye,
We'll
everybody.
see you
Thank
guys
This was
next
great.
time. Thank you.
See you, everybody. Thank you so
Beverly.
much.
Thanks, Anna. Good to see you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Doug. Howard, good to see you. Thank you for joining in. Pablo, thank you. Dennis and Andrew, always love seeing you guys. Andrea, thank you again. Cynthia,
Did we have
thank
a
you.
raffle?
You're welcome.
We did it during the middle.
Who won what?